Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
There was another moment, Rev, where President Trump was talking to Jonathan about the legacy of the late Congressman John Lewis. You'll remember that President Trump finally put out a tweet, and that was about it as the country mourned the death of the civil rights icon. Here's that exchange.
John Lewis is lying in state in the U.S. Capitol. How do you think history will remember John Lewis?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration. He chose. I never met John Lewis. Actually, I don't believe.
Do you find him impressive?
I can't say one way or the other. I find a lot of people impressive. I find many people not impressive. But no. But I didn't.
Do you find his story impressive?
He didn't come to my inauguration. He didn't come to my State of the Union speeches, and that's okay. That's his right. And again, nobody has done more for black Americans than I have.
I understand.
He should have come. I think he made a big mistake.
But taking your relationship with him out of it, do you find his story impressive, what he's done for this country?
He was a person that devoted a lot of energy and a lot of heart to civil rights, but there were many others also.
There's a petition to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama as the John Lewis Bridge. Would you support that idea?
I would have no objection to it if they'd like to do it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Would have no objection to it whatsoever.
Okay.
Rev, Donald Trump cannot even say that John Lewis was an impressive man, and he brought up repeatedly this poor, tortured, twisted soul brought up repeatedly that John Lewis did not attend his inauguration 4 years ago. So as this American icon, this American angel, our saint, as John Meacham calls him, is lying in state, Donald Trump can't even say anything nice about him. Is that because he's extraordinarily small, or he's still sending signals out to white nationalists like David Duke who say that his election was great for America?
Probably a combination of both. I mean, for one to sit there as the President of the United States, where the three preceding presidents went to not only John Lewis laying in state and gave statements, they went to his funeral in Atlanta, Georgia, none of whom lived in Atlanta, made a journey there to honor him. And you, the sitting president, are so small that when someone asks you about a historic figure laying in state, you say, but he didn't come to my inauguration. He didn't come to my speech. That's like you asking me about a great American figure, and I say, but they didn't come to hear me preach last Sunday. How small can you be? And on top of that, to not be able to in any way give the kind of due credit to to a man who was beaten and shed blood to gain all Americans the right to vote, those that are of the black community like me who were barred from the right to vote, or at least using it in a way that people could not put impediments in the way. For him not to recognize that but say, oh, there were many people there, to minimize that is to send signals to the most racist and the most backward and bigoted parts of the electorate, which he wants to appeal to. And I think it is sad that we have this person who has such a low and small self-concept that everything is about his insecurity rather than being able to see the bigger picture. For that type of person to sit in the White House is dangerous. It's the same type of person that would say with the coronavirus pandemic that we're facing, oh, we're doing better than others, rather than trying to strengthen Americans to say we're going through something that is serious. We must be strong and get through this together, inspire us to do it, and say to people we need to get an answer to this. We need to get the vaccine. We need to get a way to keep people eating rather than to try to play the baby thing. I'm doing better than John next door. We are dying, Mr. President. We don't need a comparison. We need a solution. And I think that it just runs as a thread through his whole character. He can't raise up to it because you criticize him. You got bad ratings. The ratings are off the wall. That is not even what's important here. What's important is that if you're not with me, if you're John Lewis and don't come to my inauguration, you're not great. If you're Joe Scarborough and criticize me, you have bad ratings. Yenny, yenny, yenny. That's who we have in the White House.
Well, it's interesting that you have Republican senators, we talk about a good bit, who actually are lined up and continue to support this president, who not only refuses to go visit John Lewis as he lies in state, the United States Capitol, but won't even say a positive word about him. This is something that hasn't happened in decades, that you have a president that's just this small. And Willie, the choices are not good for supporters of Donald Trump. They are either behind a man who is so small that he's refusing to pay any tribute to one of the giants in civil rights history because he didn't attend his inauguration, or he's trying to send a message to white supremacists and others that he's not going to say anything nice about a black man. And of course, you have to put that as a possibility after months of Donald Trump picking away day by day on the scab of racism in America.
Yeah, I'd like to point out also, I think a lot of people forget, John Lewis also boycotted George W. Bush's inauguration because of that, the outcome of the 2000 election that he thought wasn't legitimate at that time. You know who spoke at his funeral the other day? George W. Bush traveled from Crawford, Texas, flew to Atlanta, and spoke at John Lewis's funeral. So I'd like to add that in as well. But yeah, I mean, everything goes through the prism of Donald Trump's personality. We know that. So the first thing he said when Jonathan Swan asked him about John Lewis was, he didn't go to my funeral. He also said, I don't know John Lewis. Well, you don't have to know John Lewis personally, as Jonathan pointed out, to know his story. We know Donald Trump watches TV all day. Obviously, people were talking about John Lewis. His funeral was on TV. There was plenty to say about John Lewis if you actually didn't know anything about John Lewis going in. It's all about him. It's all about a personal grievance he felt because John Lewis wasn't nice to him once. And Jonathan Swan, you gave him every opportunity. You said take his personality out of it, take your personal relationship out of it. What do you think of his story? And even then, he couldn't conjure a nice word to say.
Well, there was also a very striking part of that exchange where he said, after saying that John Lewis didn't attend his inauguration, President Trump said, and nobody's done more for black people than I have. Well, the obvious implication is that Donald Trump is saying that he has done more for African Americans than one of the civil rights icons of the last half century. there was another part in the interview where he said no president's done more for black people apart from me, maybe Abraham Lincoln. And I said, are you honestly saying you've done more for African Americans than Lyndon Johnson, who passed the Civil Rights Act? And he said, well, how did that work out? And I sort of was confused.
Black people were able to vote.
Yeah, it was a very strange part of the. He talked about opportunity zones and criminal justice reform, etc. But I did return to it because it was such a striking comment. I said, "You're really saying you did more than Lyndon Johnson, who passed the Civil Rights Act?" And he insisted that he had.
It is Tuesday, the 4th of August of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, snoozing away right now as we speak. It is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash. A mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Don't use too much now. It might make too much of a difference. Yeah, you don't want that. Just a small scant dash, a mere pinch. Okay, well, Trump is up and at it again. I didn't even speak very much about Dr. Burks, Dr. Burks. She's escaping the fold, as they might say. Trump just pilloried her in the most, well, there's no other way around it, misogynistic way. Yeah, it's his natural inclination. So I guess maybe she'll not be invited. Well, she wasn't. There was no medical experts at that supposed pandemic response team presser yesterday, where he gets to, pontificate. Is that pontification? Do mobsters pontificate? Or do they just, spiel? Rant? Yeah, this guy, I don't know. And I have to say, hearing the audio of Trump is bad enough. You really got to look at that Jonathan Swan interview that we had a clip at the top of. Apparently, there's a large enough segment. I call it the toxic third, the constant toxic third that's always been around. Usually, they've been, pretty much capped off and set aside. But now they have some outsized power. Eek! Anyway, they are appeal. There's an appeal to Trump's, shall we say, ignorance. Because they look to Trump as being, a giant of intellect compared to them. So I know we're not supposed to be denigrating the basket of deplorables. And I got to tell you, there's baskets and baskets of them. You can't hold them all in just one basket. We're supposed to be nice to them, while at the same time, we have been pretty much in their minds disappeared, pushed out of a helicopter at about, 8,000 feet into shark-infested waters with our hands cuffed behind our backs. That sort of disappearing. That's how they think of us. They do. Oh, well, we have to go into these Democrat cities and these Democrat states because they run so terrible. You mean they're not kissing your ass? You mean there's enough lawmakers in a particular state that you aren't able to get them to kiss your ass? He doesn't remember John Lewis. Well, because, first of all, John Lewis is black, and he can't tell the difference between John Lewis and Elijah Cummings. So he figures, I thought he was a coffee boy. Historical importance? Gee, give me a break. A black guy? Trump wouldn't let black guys on the floor of his casinos when certain mobsters came through. Or him. They had to hide. When he walked across the floor and he was off the floor, the black dealers could come back in and get back to work. John Lewis meant nothing to him except an impediment. He looks to John Lewis as a reason why he and his dad were sued and then had to pay, and is still the largest fine in HUD history for racial housing discrimination. And John Lewis is part of that cabal that affected that caused that. So, of course, he's not going to care about a John Lewis. And John Lewis snubbed his inauguration. That's all he needs to know. He didn't come to my inauguration. He didn't, kiss my ring. He didn't, kiss my ass. Why should I care? Do you? Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? The House Oversight Committee invited the new Postmaster General to appear at a hearing next month instead of ordering him right now. Yeah, why don't they order him right now? There's a lot of damage this guy can do from now until then. The House Intelligence Committee launched an investigation into the Department of Homeland Security's intelligence office over its actions in Portland, Oregon, and other protests across the country. Oh, COINTELPRO sort of, huh? And a federal judge ruled it is discriminatory to deny Puerto Rico US aid. Yeah, but Trump is still suing. Does he care? Do you? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a new survey in Italy found the coronavirus is 6 times, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times more prevalent than the official data. And classified US-UK trade documents leaked ahead of Britain's 2019 election were stolen from the email account of former Trade Minister Liam Fox by Russian hackers. We're not talking about a 400-pound guy sitting on a sofa somewhere. We're talking about a military operation. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, of course, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and how about if you could pledge the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink? Remember that? Remember how good that was? Maybe people are still getting them. I don't know. You can make them at home. I don't know if it's quite the same. But anyway, if you could afford to send us that amount of funds once a month, and only if you can, okay, please. But even in these perilous times, if you're able, we are able to stretch those dollars and pay our bills. Another vendor just raised a bill on us. Wow. Well, it's tough for them, and I guess that's what they mean by the trickle-down deal. I don't get any benefits, but we get a lot of the liabilities. Ouch! Indeed. Anyway, those who have done that have allowed us to pay our bills, and that way we are, of course, able to fly under the radar and continue resisting as the founders originally intended. Thank you for all of that. All joking aside, the vendors are charging us a bit more, and but we are so ever grateful for your generosity in allowing us to continue this endeavor, going on 10 years now. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam. And go ahead, follow me there because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media. Facebook now, too, as long as they'll have me. And I think I'm going to get kicked off again. Unfortunately, oh my God, I stupidly was correcting COVID-19 disinformation, and that's what got me, that and racial history. I guess maybe they thought it was too much like the 1619 Project, which is a Marxist endeavor. That's what I'm hearing now. Everything's Marxism, socialism. And I got kicked off Facebook for a while for really a weird thing. We've been through it before. I won't go through it again. But the algorithm has been gained, and I'm just waiting to get kicked off again. So we'll see. But anyway, we are posting back quickly without going through workarounds to get on Facebook. So you could, pick up a link there even. So anyway, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts of this show. And also, let me tell you, pick up podcasts of the Justice Department, Musique Sans Frontières, by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart. YouTube for West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, not for the music, because YouTube is the way YouTube is. And iTunes, or is it Apple Podcasts, or are they the same, like Rakuten and eBay? Rakuten and eBay. Apple Podcasts and iTunes. You tell me what the difference is. Absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, universal mail-in ballots. Okay, just as an aside on that, why don't we go ahead and just use absentee ballots so we won't use the universal mail-in ones, okay? Happy? All right, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder, Tuesdays. And it comes by way of the American Independent, but they picked it up from the Associated Press because that's part of their national feed. The House Oversight Committee has invited the new Postmaster General. Why don't invite? I don't like this invite. Tell him to show up and tell him to show up by Thursday. That'll give him enough time to get his, thing together. Anyway, he's going to appear at a hearing next month to examine operational changes to the U.S. Postal Service that are causing delays in mail deliveries across the country. Don't touch that mail. Don't touch it. But those are ballots. Exactly. Don't touch them. Let them sit. The plan imposed by Louis DeJoy, a repug fundraiser. I'll add the editorial thing. You can tell when it's editorial. The AP would never write like that. But I have to translate it for us anyway. Okay? Okay. A repug fundraiser who took over the top job at the Postal Service in June eliminates overtime because this is the plan, for hundreds of thousands of postal workers and orders that mail be kept until the next day if postal distribution centers are running late. Because the way it has been for, since Ben Franklin, you finish your route. And if it takes you a little bit more time, or a bit more time, you finish the route. Neither snow, nor sleet, nor fascist imposition should stop the U.S. Postal Service from, fulfilling their appointed routes. Isn't that what makes America great? Yeah, well, we all know that. Representative Carolyn Maloney, a New York Democrat who chairs the oversight panel, said the September 17 hearing will focus on the need for on-time mail delivery during the ongoing pandemic and upcoming election, which is expected to include a major expansion of mail-in ballots, which Trump is trying to say, we can't have those. I'll lose if people vote. Exactly. Donald Trump opposes expanding voting by mail, arguing that it will trigger fraud, even though there's no evidence that will happen. And what's funny is that there's clips when he's running around with that Bush kid, and for entertainment tonight, I don't know, E.T., I think that's what they called it. Go home, E.T., is what I always thought. Anyway, that little Bush brat was running around with Trump, and Trump tried to do a mail-in ballot or something, or tried to vote in person, and they wouldn't allow him because the way the system is that it catches people, right? And then Trump tried to do a mail-in ballot, and he got caught basically trying to break the law on that too. So of course, Trump is going to judge everybody by his value system. But the only thing is that he got caught. He doesn't get that part. They get caught. That's why it's really hard to flip votes with mail-in ballots. He talks about ballot harvesting. The only people that ever been convicted of ballot harvesting are GOP people like that guy in Georgia. Jeez. Look what we do. We're able to do it, so everybody must be. No, we have morals and follow the law, and you guys, well, what does Rove say since he's part of the group now? We make our own reality, and while you're reacting to that, we're off making our own reality somewhere else. Trump also called the Postal Service a joke and said that package shipping rates should be at least 4 times higher for heavy users like Amazon. But shipping and packages are actually a top revenue generator for the Postal Service. And critics say Trump is merely looking to punish Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos in retaliation for unflattering coverage in the Washington Post, which Bezos owns. You would think dismembering a Washington Post journalist would have been enough to get Bezos' attention. You would think, huh? The Oversight Committee intended to have the hearing for DeJoy this week, Maloney said, but was told that DeJoy could not attend because of a meeting of the Postal Service's Board of Governors. DeJoy has confirmed his availability for the September 17th hearing, she said. Well, okay, so they're not going to meet this week, meet next. Wait until September 17th. Give me a break. The hearing comes as the Postal Service is reeling from mail delays and financial problems, even as record numbers of mail ballots are expected in the presidential elections because of the pandemic. Postal Service officials, bracing for steep losses from the nationwide shutdown caused by the virus, have warned they will run out of money by the end of September without help from Congress. The service reported a $4.5 billion loss for the quarter ending in March. Well, how about not having to pay that stupid retirement plan they got to pay, 75 years into the future for workers that they haven't hired and haven't been born yet? No one else has to do that. No other company, no other entity in the history of the world has ever had to do that. In a separate letter, Senator Joe Manchin, remember him? He's a blue dog. But boy, he stepped up here. He asked DeJoy to clarify whether the Postal Service plans to close some post offices and reduce hours at others in his rural state. Signs hung at some locations announced proposed closures as soon as August 22nd or the 24th, calling such an action a violation of both federal law and Postal Service rules that require 120 days' notice before any closures. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Now, they might think they're anonymous, but I would think that this article out of Reuters would prove that maybe the cops already know who they are. The U.S. House Intel Committee launched an investigation yesterday, Monday, into the DHS's Intel office, including its actions in Portland, Oregon, and its involvement in other anti-racism protests across the country. The reporting regarding the monitoring of peaceful protesters, creating and disseminating intelligence reports about journalists and protesters, and potential exploitation of electronic devices is deeply troubling. Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, a Democrat, wrote in a letter to top DHS officials. A Democrat. The United States has seen largely peaceful protests nationwide since the death of George Floyd. Protests in cities, including Portland, have at times erupted into arson and violence, and federal officers sent to the northwestern city have repeatedly clashed with crowds targeting the federal courthouse there, except when the feds left, the violence stopped. Why is that? The probe shows that Democrats will use congressional authority to investigate efforts by the Trump administration to demonize protesters and deploy federal personnel and law enforcement operations in several cities despite opposition from local mayors and governors. Wow, it's like COINTELPRO. In his letter to acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf and acting Department Intelligence Chief Horace Jen, Schiff requested detailed intelligence reporting documents that informed a recommendation by then Chief of the DHS Intelligence Operation on July 25th, requesting that DHS reports on anarchist-related Portland protesters refer to them as violent Antifa anarchists inspired. Oh, you mean white supremacists dressed up in gas masks and carrying umbrellas, breaking windows to start a race war because Charlie Manson spoke to them. The official who wrote the memo, acting DHS Intelligence Chief Brian Murphy, was subsequently transferred to a different job over the weekend. Oh, trying to hide him, eh? In his letter to DHS, Schiff also requested that Jen, Murphy, and several other DHS officials, including intelligence officials, give interviews to the committee this month. Schiff said that if the department did not produce the witnesses and documents he requested, he would consider issuing subpoenas. Now, of course, the Department of Homeland Security did not respond to a request for comment because they already know who you are. Coco of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal judge ruled that it is unconstitutional to deny Puerto Ricans living in the U.S. territory access to 3 federal welfare programs in a major decision cheered by many. But wait, there's always a however. However, the judge also granted a 2-month administrative stay of the injunction at the federal government's request, which means the decision for now will apply only to the 9 plaintiffs in the case. Legal experts warn that they expect the U.S. government to appeal the ruling and, if unsuccessful, to take it as far as the U.S. Supreme Court, given the millions of dollars at stake. Millions of dollars? Oh, do tell. It is a precedent. It is a significant change without a doubt. Whether it will be historic depends on its prevalence, Eduardo Roman, president of the Bar Association of Puerto Rico, told the AP. A U.S. Justice Department spokesman declined to comment on the decision because they were fuming. They were mad. In a 70-page ruling, Judge William G. Young called it a discriminatory policy to deny Puerto Ricans supplemental security income, which provides extra income for the elderly, blind, or disabled. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, but now SNAP. And Medicare Part D low-income subsidies, which helps cover the cost of prescription drug plans. The federal safety net is flimsier and more porous in Puerto Rico than in the rest of the nation, he wrote. To be blunt, the federal government discriminates against Americans who live in Puerto Rico, meaning Trump is a racist. Young noted that the U.S. territory of 3.2 million people has a 43% poverty rate, and that the 9 plaintiffs are poor enough to qualify for at least one of the 3 federal welfare programs. Now, however, Young in part argued that Congress could have spread out benefit reductions equally and that poor people generally do not pay income tax regardless of where they live. He also noted that from 2000 to 2005, Puerto Ricans paid more in federal taxes than 6 states and all the U.S. territories combined. In addition, he wrote that in the fiscal year of 2019, the federal government collected more than $3.5 billion in taxes from Puerto Rican residents. So yeah, they want to take it all this way to the Supreme Court, considering the millions, or it looks to me like billions involved. All right, we better get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Hank's back at the helm. A trend has been emerging over the years with respect to Tom Hanks' heroes. None are ever anointed or have special powers or are answering a call of destiny. They are, rather, average men rising to an occasion. Think Chesley Sullenberger, the hero pilot in Sully, or his portrayal of Captain Phillips dealing with Somali pirates. The new World War II action film Greyhound finds Hanks back on the high seas portraying Commander Ernest Krause in a Hanks-written screenplay from C.S. Forster's 1955 novel The Good Shepherd. Set in the under-remembered Battle of the Atlantic, where more Allied service people died than on D-Day in its immediate aftermath, Commander Krause is embarking on his first wartime command, escorting a convoy of merchant ships from the U.S. to Liverpool through a gauntlet of German U-boats in the North Atlantic. The film's action occurs in what the crew calls the Black Pit, an approximately 3-day stretch of ocean travel where the ships are out of range of land-based air cover, and action is what we get. Though there's less than 90 minutes of it, it is riveting as the convoy, not always successfully, plays cat and mouse with the U-boats. From the action emerges an understated character study of Commander Krause, who remains awake and on duty through the whole ordeal. We see him call for his slippers after his Navy-issued shoes turn his feet bloody. We see him take time to say grace before snacks, even under near-battle conditions. Despite at least a couple of familiar faces amongst the crew, though, director Aaron Schneider gives us no backstory on their characters, which feels more like a decision than an oversight. That decision, clearly, being to keep Greyhound a stark white-knuckle ride, during which a good man answers the call of duty. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. In 2006, a 26-year-old California man named Uriah Courtney was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping and rape, despite having an alibi for the time the crimes were committed.
And there were two witnesses. They saw a lineup in the police station, and they both identified the same person. And he was convicted entirely based on those two eyewitness accounts.
Salk Institute for Biological Studies neuroscientist Tom Albright. He says years later, the California Innocence Project looked into the case.
And it turns out that the DNA that was found at the crime scene was not the DNA of Uriah Courtney.
After 8 years behind bars, Courtney was set free, but his case is not unique.
There are now hundreds of cases in which individuals have been exonerated based on this post-conviction DNA analysis.
Most of these innocent people were sent to prison because witnesses misidentified them.
Somebody picked them out of a lineup, and that information was taken seriously by the police, and the jury believed it.
Why do witnesses sometimes get it so wrong? Albright explains that our memory for visual events is notoriously flawed.
If somebody tells us that they saw something, we figure, well, it must be true. They saw it with their own eyes.
Lineups typically show witnesses photos of 6 faces, 5 of innocent people, and 1 of the suspect.
The eyewitness is simply asked to identify any person that they remember from the crime scene.
But only having them pick their top choice doesn't account for how well the witness remembers that face. This issue can result in errors. Albright's team thinks there's a better way, by tapping into the strength of the witness's memory. In an experiment, they had volunteers watch a clip of a grisly crime scene from an obscure Hollywood movie. The next day, these study subject witnesses viewed a 6-person lineup that showed just 2 faces at a time. Think of an eye test. Better now or now?
So on each pair, the witness will vote for one or the other of the faces. Which one looks more similar to the person you remember from the crime scene? We then tabulate that vote, and the face that has the largest number of votes is the winner.
Compared to traditional lineup techniques, the 2 faces at a time method led to a less biased and more accurate identification of the fictional perpetrator.
People are far better at making relative judgments than they are at making absolute judgments.
The study is in the journal Nature Communications. The researchers think their approach to lineups has the potential to reduce wrongful convictions, resulting in more justice for all. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The discovery of penicillin in 1928 by Alexander Fleming was one of the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century. It's hard to imagine a world before the development of what many consider to be miracle drugs. However, just 90 years ago, antibiotics weren't available. Thanks to antibiotics, some common illnesses such as strep throat are now easily treated, whereas in the past they often led to serious complications. Antibiotics serve an important role in keeping you and your loved ones healthy, but it's important to remember that antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. Most common infections such as colds, flu, most sore throats, bronchitis, and many sinus and ear infections are caused by viruses and do not respond to antibiotic treatment. These infections can be overcome by simply treating the symptoms and letting the illness run its course. Unfortunately, antibiotics have often been overused, resulting in decreased effectiveness and an increase in antibiotic-resistant diseases. Antibiotic resistance, or the increased ability of bacteria to survive in the presence of antibiotics, has become a major public health threat that we all need to help fight. When a person takes antibiotics, they are at risk for possibly having a bad reaction to these drugs. Some side effects can be quite serious, or even life-threatening in the case of an allergic reaction or severe diarrhea. This is why it is very important to only use antibiotics when they are absolutely needed, and not for viral infections. Talk to your healthcare professional about the best treatment for your illness. If it is caused by a virus, follow his or her recommendation for treating the symptoms. Learn more about appropriate antibiotic use and how to feel better when you don't need an antibiotic by visiting CDC's Get Smart, Know When Antibiotics Work website at cdc.gov/getsmart/community.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Should we fear Donald Trump's trumpeting the idea of postponing November's election? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In a July 31st tweet, Donald Trump, after declaring that the 2020 election would be extraordinarily inaccurate and fraudulent, floated the idea of postponing the election until people can, quote, securely and safely vote, end quote, presumably in person, after the danger from COVID-19 has passed, sometime in the indefinite future, presumably with him remaining in power. The proposal is preposterous and will gain no traction because a president has no constitutional or statutory power to postpone an election or to remain in power after his term ends. None. Zero. But there was a second part and purpose of the tweet, to lambaste voting by mail, which will be used by states more often in 2020. 5 states, prior to COVID-19, used voting by mail exclusively for their elections, including heavily and reliably Republican Utah. What's dangerous here is Trump's attempt to undermine the electoral process and our faith in it. Combine that effort along with his recent refusal to answer Fox News reporter Chris Wallace's question, would he accept the results of the election if he lost? That's scary. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that the United States and Mexico signed the Mexican Farm Labor Agreement. It became known as the Bracero Program. The word bracero can be translated into one who works with his arms and refers to farm workers. This program allowed Mexican agricultural workers to enter the United States on a temporary basis. There was a shortage of labor due to the U.S. entry into World War II. Large American farm owners were clamoring for cheap labor. By 1945, more than 100,000 Mexican migrant workers were employed through bracero contracts, mostly in western and southern states. Most were farm workers, but others labored on the railroads. The program continued until 1964. More than 4.5 million individual labor contracts with Mexican workers were awarded as part of this program. Many of these workers faced exploitation and discrimination. For example, some of the workers had to subject themselves to fumigation by DDT before they could enter the United States to work. These Mexican workers were often paid less than white workers performing the same labor, and they were often cheated out of their wages. The workers were required to work long hours under often grueling conditions. Despite this exploitation, the Bracero program did have some minimal protections for pay and working conditions for those under contract. Farm owners unwilling to meet even these low standards began to hire undocumented labor to skirt the rules. Labor organizer Ernesto Galarraza wrote a book about the program called Stranger in Our Fields. In it, he recounts a worker explaining, quote, "In this camp, we have no names. We are called only by numbers." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit already, though we are expected to be quite cooler. Oh no, we've changed the forecast. It is now nearly the same as yesterday. They say it's only going to be 92, but we bumped about 98 yesterday, so looking to be nearly the same. Small chance of thunderstorms today or later on today, though they will be pretty much pronounced tomorrow. Abundant sunshine today. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Mainly clear skies tonight with a low in the mid-60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And then a stray shower and thunderstorm tomorrow with highs in the upper 80s. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County here in the southern part of Oregon has now spiked to 394 cases from 357 to 394, and one confirmed death, but I have to tell you that's vastly and grossly undercounted indeed. Barometric pressure is coming up because I got to tell you that grass pollen is moderate right here at the mothership. The air quality index in the region is good at 22 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at 8. That barometric pressure is rising at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 74 and fair. Paris is 80 degrees and sunny, you would expect, and I would say probably muggy too. Ooh. Rome is 82 and partly cloudy with a thunderstorm warning that could affect electrical infrastructure during a pandemic. Kyiv is 85 and fair. Kabul is 82 and fair with a lot of wind. Hong Kong is 77 with a light rain. Tokyo is 82 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 51 and clear. San Francisco, California is 54 and mostly cloudy. And New York is 78 degrees with rain, and you have a massive flood warning, so do take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Almost 1.5 million people in Italy, or 2.5% of the population, have developed coronavirus antibodies, a figure 6 times more than official numbers reported, according to a survey from statistics agency Istat. The survey by Istat and the Health Ministry was based on antibody tests conducted on 64,660 people. Official figures show almost 250,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 patients in Italy, with over 35,000 deaths. The survey found marked local differences with the northern region of Lombardy, with the epidemic first broke out in February, showing 7.5% of the population had tested positive, compared to just 0.3% in the southern region of Sicily. The survey also found almost 30% of people with antibodies were asymptomatic, pointing to the risk of the illness being spread by people unaware they were carriers.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jack Stubbs and Guy Falconbridge of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and this is pretty much a follow-up from some reportage that we had reporting last week. Classified U.S. and U.K. trade documents leaked ahead of Britain's 2019 election were stolen from the email account of former Trade Minister Liam Fox by suspected Russian hackers. Two sources with direct knowledge of the matter told Reuters. The sources who spoke on condition that they don't want anyone to know who they are because law enforcement investigation is underway, said the hackers accessed the account multiple times between July 12th and October 21st of last year. They declined to name which Russian group or organization they believed was responsible, but said the attack bore the hallmarks of a state-backed operation. The Kremlin did not immediately respond to a request for comment because why would they? Among the stolen information were 6 tranches of documents detailing British trade negotiations with the U.S., which Reuters first reported last year were leaked and disseminated online by a Russian disinformation campaign. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab confirmed that report last month, saying that Russian actors had sought to interfere in the election through the online amplification of illicitly acquired and leaked government documents. And of course, Trump is saying, why can't I have some of those? Reuters was not able to determine which of Fox's email accounts was hacked, but when it was first compromised, it was not clear if Fox, who was still a member of Parliament, but stood down as trade minister in July last year in a cabinet reshuffle, was a minister at the time. A British government spokeswoman said, there is an ongoing criminal investigation into how the documents were acquired, and it would be inappropriate to comment further at this point. She added that the government had very robust systems in place to protect the IT systems of officials and staff. I guess it shows. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.